Okay. All right, folks. Maybe we should get started so we can get concluded in a good time. The Tonight I want to do essentially three things. Well, at least two, maybe three. Uh, the first is to obviously kind of do the sort of debrief that it's been a couple of weeks since I've seen you, a couple 3 weeks. So I'd just like to get a sense of where you are at this point, where what's happening in your building, what's happening in terms of sort of the crisis going forward, and then also to be able to look at the basis for the school improvement team and the school improvement plan. And by basis, I mean the state codes that deal with that, and the requirements of the state codes. And hopefully you've heard this before, but I don't think it's ever enough to have heard it, because there are some little nuances in it that you have to pay a little bit of attention to. And so we'll kind of walk through that state code again and talk about some of those little nuances that we kind of have to operate with. Uh, and before we do the state code thing, we'll talk a little bit about how school regulations kind of come into being, which part of that is actual legal code, which part of it is regulation, which part of it is administration. Because almost all uh, state requirements for agencies to do certain things, and certainly schools are no different, have to have three stages. They have to have an underlying legal code. In other words, it has to be a law, and they have to have sort of a properly constructed um, uh, set of policies and guidelines and rules under which the law can be implemented. And somewhere in there, you have to have the appropriation process, because when the legislature approves a law, it does not necessarily approve the funding for the law. And we'll see at least one example of that in the state code, where they changed the funding process right in the middle. And there has to be some way of assessing whether it was successful or not, or whether it met its purposes or not. And so those three elements have to be there, and we'll see where they're kind of embedded in the state code. But first, uh, I'm assuming everybody is doing okay, and all things are calm and quiet. I went back to Boone last week, one afternoon, for 2 hours for the first time since March, actually probably February. And there were amazingly not too many students around in the middle of early afternoon in the middle of the week. And so, my guess is that even the students that might still be on campus are probably not many of them going to classes that doesn't involve labs or some sort of performance thing, or something that maybe can't be done any other way. Everybody else seems to be doing it as much virtual as possible. So it's a different climate, it's a different place, but I felt like I needed to go back, because I got to get these nice little face masks they had made up for us. Everybody needs to have two or three of these when you're doing virtual instruction. But uh, anyhow, we have nice face masks, and since I was a veteran, I had a certificate for some free meals in the dining hall that's not open. So that works really well too. So it's kind of like everybody's trying to do what needs to be done, but it's not really happening uh, the way it needs to happen. And So I thought it was a bit chaotic, but chaotic without anybody around, which is an unusual circumstance. So that was my example or my notion about the changes in Boone since last time I've been back there. So, what's happening in your schools? What's going on? I mean, are things uh, trending up, trending down? Morale through the roof, through the floor?
I'd say morale at our school is sinking at a consistent rate, realizing that we're forced to pass a student unless they do literally nothing, which means that there's bigger things going on in their lives. They can't even log in or turn anything in. Um, and the students who are passing have, there's a general feeling among the staff that the students haven't learned shit. And
Mhm.
even though they try to make the rigor as best they can, the way that we're forced to grade from district, upper level policy means that the students have to try extremely hard to fail. And so teachers are getting, jaded because the students are good at figuring out the game, how to pass with the least effort possible, which I don't blame them for whatsoever, because that's a skill they should use religiously in their professional career. Because you don't want to overwork yourself if you don't need to. And I think that that's certainly a negative. Positive is that at a meeting last week, I think, um, me and a few other people were able to successfully, for now, convince the district upper level administration that returning to school as from a secondary perspective, high school is not really in the cards for this year, which was a big concern of mine, that they were going to try to force people back. And so we kind of had uh, everybody except for the superintendent, a polite discussion of ideas. And that was encouraging because I thought it was going to go the other way, and I would have had to make I was prepared to make a big vocal stand, which probably would have tanked my already tanking career in Nashville City Schools. uh, but I kind of like am at the point where I just don't really give a shit anymore. And if they don't want authentic Nick, fighting for what I think is right, then I'm not a good fit anyway. So why force a round peg in a square hole? In that regard. But so kind of mix of sad, depressing emotional state, and at least we're not forcing people to come back to school
Right.
to like have their family members die. So that's good.
Well, there's sort of an interesting learning moment in there. You talked about morale is going down at a constant rate. We could use a little calculus to figure out how bad it's going to get a little bit later on. I mean, we'll just take that differential and figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you can work a formula out on that. What's the decay of morale rate formula?
A little discrete math on that.
A little discrete math. We
Yeah.
might have to make up some numbers of some sort, but we'll figure it out. Okay.
Yeah.
Someone else.
We've spent, in Guilford County, we have spent over 2 solid weeks in CDC code red for the highest rate of spread of the virus, the highest risk of transmission in schools. We still have pre-K and kindergarten attending on a voluntary basis, but at 4:30 p.m. on a Monday night before K2 was supposed to return full-time the next day, we had a press conference and announced that the health risk was too great. And there's been a lot of backlash in our community. There's a lot of backlash from people who say you've given parents options who don't want to come to school or don't feel safe sending their children to school, but you don't give any options to those of us who do. There was tons of backlash for just what is criticized as horrific communication. And then we had this extra fun layer of backlash of the metrics have been rising and have been atrocious for multiple weeks, and you knew that when you met as a board last week, and you still said full
Why
steam
not?
ahead.
Yeah.
So we've had a great loss of trust in our public health director, which is pretty scary. She did say on a live recorded board meeting that the virus, she refused to admit that it was airborne. So there's a great eroding of public confidence in her expertise. She said that it would be perfectly safe to open schools because we have great mitigation strategies of hand washing and mask wearing, along with social distancing where possible. And then 6 days later, she was at the podium downtown in front of central office announcing that it was her recommendation. We didn't open. So I think district officials then later found out that the health department was incorrectly calculating our data. So lots of things to erode trust in public health. And if we can't trust public health right now, our superintendent has said repeatedly, like, she's not a medical doctor. She's not an infectious disease doctor or virologist. I mean, so I guess I'm of the school of thought that education, not just public education, but all education, we should have a federal and state level response to set very clear guidance. We should not be leaving this up to school districts and hanging superintendents and teachers out to dry to make these decisions on their own. I asked my boss in our meeting on Monday morning, are we just gonna week to week have press conferences on Friday nights of it's a go for Monday or it's not a go. It's a go for Monday, it's not a go. Because that's what we've done the last 2 weeks. And that's also like really crazy, making it unstable for families and unstable for kids who are excited to go back. So not only are we, I guess to wrap this up, sorry guys, we're in a very high risk of transmission. We don't have, we haven't stuck to any of the plans that the board actually voted on and approved. We have low confidence in public health, and we are in a week-to-week holding pattern for announcements about reentry to buildings. Meanwhile, many principals, because it was allowed to be a site-based decision, are still requiring all of their staff to report to buildings all day, every day to teach virtually, in some cases where there's not even enough broadband to teach remotely from those same buildings.
Yeah, it's always an interesting kind of dichotomy. Planning always involves some element of getting it wrong. Always. I mean, you have some chance of getting it wrong, but the longer, the better data you use, and the longer you can, the quicker, not longer, but the quicker you can get to the decision process, the better off you are. And there seems to be a sense out there that if we just wait this thing out, it's gonna, it'll get better at the end of the week, or it'll get better. This is a freaking pandemic. They don't get better. If anything, if you violate the, rules of the bug, the bug's gonna come get you. And so it's, I'm not saying that it's just the nature of a virus. A virus is not a living thing. It just goes where it goes. I mean, where the winds take it and where the people take it. And so it's not it's not a sentient being. It's an opportunistic creature. It's not even a creature. It's an opportunistic virus. I don't know, we're still not quite sure what viruses are, but that's part of the reason of difficulty in coming up with vaccines and treatments and things like that, because viruses are, one of those things that are under one set of guidelines. They're inanimate objects that it might as well be a rock. And on other sets of guidelines, they're, an animate creature, though they're not like any other creature because they don't have DNA. And so it is something that you just, you have to mitigate. But, at some point you also have to get lucky with a vaccine or, a treatment or something. But so we're only left with mitigation. And, I think that I read or heard that if we go for the, herd, uh, sort of the herd notion of herd immunity, that's only going to cost us 10 million Americans. If we're willing to have, let 10 million people die, we can kind of wait this thing out. But then we'd have to hope every other country in the world does the same thing. And so instead of 10 million, you're talking, 200 or 300 million people around the world. So it's, viruses are not things you rationalize with, and you have to make quick decisions. You make quick decisions, and you catch grief, because you make quick decisions. You have to analyze things, but the decision not only has to be well thought out, it has to be long range. As you said, you can't go week to week to week. You have to say, okay, we're at this point on this trend. I don't see us getting any better for 3 weeks, a month, or whatever. And so we're going to shut down. We're going to keep out there for at least the next month. And then if you get too far into the semester, then you realize it's gone. You don't try to get back in the building, and you let the funders figure it out. The folks in Raleigh are not going to penalize school divisions for not having kids in school if virtually every school division in the state doesn't have any kids in school. I mean, that's foolish. And even for some people as stupid as they are, it makes it's logic not to do that. And so any of you ever read anything from Molly Ivins? Molly Ivins was this really creative reporter in Texas. And she was down there in the era of Ann Richards, and when W was being the governor and all that sort of stuff. And then she was relatively young, but she had cancer, and after a while didn't make it. But Molly had two favorite sayings. One was that during this time of the year when the legislature is in session, all villages have lost their idiots. And the kind of the other thing that she always said that there are people that are smart, and then there are people that go into politics. And so she was very, very critical of the whole political environment. And I'm thinking if Molly Ivins was still alive now, she would probably kill herself from just frustration of writing so hard, because she would be doing all the "I told you so, told you so, told you so." But anyhow, it is kind of that notion. Other guys, other folks, other schools.
Yeah, I would echo some of Alexa's comments. Our county also has had pretty bad numbers. They've been our worst numbers from the start. And, we've got a couple other rallies planned here this week. So again, that'll surely help mitigate the spread. That's really convenient. I think Alexa also hit the nail on the head regarding public pressure and public confidence. This past week, I'm our chairperson. And, so yesterday I spent 2.5, 3 hours reviewing possible reopening plans. And it's difficult, to look at it because I'm like, no school has the resources needed to make any of these plans work successfully. But then B, also, like, every time we have worked on a plan or prepared to adopt a plan or go forward with a plan, something has changed either through chicanery or deceit, other tactics. So again, like, we've been prepared for all these things, and then it's changed time and time again. And, so they want us to prepare another plan for the next board meeting. And it's like, well, what happens again if we change it? Or, like we've also said, if we do open in January in person as proposed, like, what happens if our metrics are worse then? Because, like, you have, I'd say at least 30, maybe higher % of the population that has just given up on mitigating the virus. So, like, what happens if our numbers are even worse in January than they currently are? Are we just supposed to forge ahead with pioneer spirit and, roll the dice and play roulette with everyone's lives? Like, what's an acceptable risk factor? Again, I'm like, all of our metrics are going in the opposite direction of where they were supposed to be for any of our proposed opening things. And I'm like, all the proposed metrics were still worse than what caused the initial shutdown in March. So it's like, and we know more about the virus now than we did then. So there's just a lot of, ugh. On a positive note though, we're having parent-teacher conferences. I've had every parent show up. So that's the first year I can claim that. So I'll give kudos to that for remote learning. But I've had every parent show up so far for parent-teacher conferences. So I will celebrate that.
That's a miracle, even in remotely, even virtually, that's a miracle. Just finding, people willing to come spend some time virtually or are available, virtually. But yeah, you should be applauded for that. Other folks. I think we begin to see the, kind of the general trend here of what's happening. This is a kind of, the rolling disaster where it doesn't seem like you can, at least in what we're doing now, get out of it. The water keeps rolling in. It dries up for a couple of days, but then the water rolls right back in. And so it's, we're in one of those circumstances where you have to do a little bit of day-by-day management because you need to keep everybody safe. And so you respond to those things that come at you day to day in a way of trying to keep people safe. But you also can't be stupid in the long term, because if you determine metrics and you're going to make a metric-based decision, then trust your metrics. You don't walk away from decisions that your metric tells you need to be dealing with. And that's that's where we get this hedging our bets and back and forth and back and forth. Well, all that works nicely except when it involves lives, and when it involves lives, it's another world, it's another story. And so it is I wonder, and this is just me, I wonder, we have been trying over the past couple of decades to increase professionalism in the school leadership ranks, because that was a criticism. We didn't have good leadership. A couple of decades ago, we kept constantly hearing that, although nobody could provide us with much evidence of it, but we kept constantly hearing that. And so the push from the federal level was always to increase the leadership skills and leadership capacity of administrators in public education in particular. And what we ended up doing, I'm afraid, is we ended up developing programs that are based around, going by the book. Everybody has to follow every single guideline, and we've got, books and books and books of guidelines. And at the same time, we say that, we want schools to have local control. We want the principal or the leaders in the building to be in control of the building, but we only like them to be in control of the building if they follow the script, if they follow the book. And so the leeway that you have in making decisions is not very big. You don't have big margins of error. And so you're left feeling frustrated. You're left kind of feeling like you're left out of the mix, because your voice is not really one that's making, the decisions that seem to matter right now. You're making the right decisions day to day based on the safety of faculty and staff and students and parents and everybody else. But you're maybe not allowing yourself to make the decisions that are a little bit out of the, over in the margin and not necessarily on the page. And so it is a difficult time. And I'm afraid part of our model for training school leaders is somewhat to blame for this, is that there needs to be some creativity in leadership skills, and not necessarily everybody follows exactly the same book straight down the line. But that's just me. And yeah, I'm an old style 60s liberal, so you know, you can blame it on that. But it is distressing to see how sometimes building leaders and division leaders make really, I mean, you can't call it anything else, but crappy decisions because that's by the policy. And so I think we're going to have to fix that. I think we're going to have to figure out how to get around that somehow, and create more creativity in the training and in the support services and the support structures, so that, you know, school administrators have some flexibility and have some you know, wherewithal to take into account what's on the ground. You know, what's happening on the ground, and where are your metrics, and where do they need to be. But it's, you know, I don't know, that maybe that's unrealistic. Maybe we need to approach it a different way. I don't know, but there is some fundamental changes we're going to have to make to educational systems to accommodate things like this, now that we know what it's like when something like this comes at us. And given you know, the ravages of climate change, I suspect we're going to see stuff like this coming at us, different varieties that or whatever, a little bit more regularly and a little bit more rapidly over the years, because these are all things that are part of the melting world. And you know, all these things have been locked up in the tundras and permafrost and all like that for, you know, tens of thousands of years, eons. They're, you know, they're thawing, they're waking up, and we're starting to see organisms that we haven't seen in, you know, tens of thousands of years are reemerging. And it's not that it was that bad, but if you didn't live tens of thousands of years ago, you don't have any immunity to those things. So to me, that's the next big issue: is how do we change the whole management, the whole structure of schools to accommodate, and structure of society in general, to accommodate this coming, you know, I don't want to say barrage, that sounds too strong, but this coming, you know, movement toward more and more ecological and biological and you know, and sort of environmental illness that we're going to be looking at. But that's long range, you know. You have to figure that one out. You know, I'm 70. I'll be dead by then. So you know, you figure it out. And all I can do is say, you're going to have to figure this out because it's going to have to happen. Any other thoughts before we kind of do our due diligence tonight and talk about the content that we were supposed to talk about? Nothing else? Okay. Next week is election day. We will not meet. Go vote. Depending on what you do election night, you know, go pray, go drink, go do whatever you do election night. You know, everybody has sort of a ritual of doing that. My ritual is I just go to bed and, you know, get up and see what tomorrow brings. But I'm not allowed to do that because my wife wants to hang on every turn of the wheel, so to speak. But you know, the die is cast, and it's going to be what it's going to be. You're not changing. Nobody's minds are changing now, and so you know, it is what it is. But so we won't meet because I'm pretty sure my mind wouldn't be into it, and hopefully your mind wouldn't be into it too, because this is a big election. We have to see how it turns out. I have opened up all the other resources all the way through the end of the semester. We have taken out 2 assignments, you know, the last forum and a little quiz thing, because they didn't really matter. And I pulled a week out that I thought the content was not terribly useful, and I plugged in just a couple of things from it at different places. Now, I was not able to simplify the three main assignments, because those are just, those are the rubrics and those are the assignments, and that's the, protocol that the program has put into place, and so they're not going to bend on that. So we have to do those, and we've tried to push the deadlines as far as we can, and we've tried to create as much group work time as we can, because most of that involves some group activity. So just so as you know, I did what I could with it, and that's about all I could do. And I think we're going to revisit these things again under the circumstance. Yeah.
Can I ask for clarification then?
Yeah.
You're referring to those being group work. I thought the last two remaining projects were individual assignments.
Well, actually, one of them is well, let me get to those. Let me go over here. Make sure I got my 2 cents worth. Have been changing all of my course stuff for all three classes. So I thought that was what I did. All right, let me. It's all the way back up here right now. Yeah. Okay. Yes, you are correct, but they do involve group, either sharing it up with a group or discussing it with a group. And though they will be, you can kind of as a group work those things out, because you need to look at all the, the SIP stuff and the school SLO stuff and all of that sort of stuff, before you can actually do those last two things. Yes, two things. So the big group thing is the program evaluation project, but when you get down into let me find it. I see one thing I did not pull out that I need to pull out. This check for understanding thing shouldn't be in there, but I don't think I left you a place to put it anyhow. Okay. It's the developing a principles model for school improvement. And that is we're going to use the same group configurations, but that is a group project.
So now it's a group project. It's no longer a solo.
Yeah, it had never been an individual, but I misspoke earlier up in the other part of it. We always had it as a group project, but it's basically because you should be sharing your talking with each other in terms of what the individual principles improvement project would look like. I think the original idea, and this makes more sense to me to do it that way, is to have you talk with each other as you prepare it, and then submit each of you kind of a Google Doc to talk about the strengths and weaknesses that you need to deal with in terms of the principles model for school improvement. That's really foggy, isn't it? Yeah, sorry about that. All right, here's what it needs to be. And I will change the language here to make sure that's all. I realize now this is real kind of ambiguous. we'll create this time somewhere along the way here. You're asynchronous for a couple more sessions until we have the last session on the 17th. You will meet as a group and talk about the thoughts that you have in mind about what goes into your particular improvement model, principles model for school improvement. What is it that you need to do? What is it that you need to improve with? What is it that you need to think about? And then each of you will post a small document up on, you'll post a small document by doing it in Google Docs, share it with me, and then I'll respond to that, and then we'll kind of take it from there. So that last one is a combo. It's group but individual response, but I will make a change. I will offer a few more notes there on that one. Yeah. I was just working through that today and I didn't get that quite right.
So I think we were looking for clarification on the two big projects, not that one that's in the lesson on November 17th that you were just looking at, but the Equity Gaps, Equity Opportunities Project and the SIP project. Can you tell us more about those two?
All right, the SIP project is the let me get my mind around it. If I can ever get to the daggone rubric, there it is. Just 1 more second. Okay. That's where the issue is. All right. Okay. Yeah, the SIP, geez. Where am I at now? I got to go back over here. Yes. The SIP, the School Improvement Plan Project, the SIP project, is individual. Right? Is that what you understood?
I mean, if you change it to group, then I'll be fine. Whatever.
I say group. I say
Definitely
group.
think that's why we've asked, because like both have been mentioned at different times, whether it was individual or if it was a group throughout the semester. So,
Okay.
And I think we spoke about some of the challenges of many of our SIP teams aren't actually meeting at this
All right.
time, and that
Yeah.
SIP is the least important thing for most of our schools right now.
Yeah, it might be the least important thing for the school, but it's one of the most important things for your credentialing. Yeah, it has to be, it's something that the university has to document in portfolio. And, you know, the state comes in and says, hey, we need to see those things. We have to allow them to randomly pull samples. And so that's the dilemma with it. Yeah, I was trying to maybe downgrade it a little bit, but at the same time, it is something that we have to have. Does that make, I mean, I'm just kind of hands tied on that one. I can't do anything with that one. The opportunities gap, yeah, we can come back and talk a little bit more about that. We don't necessarily, but the two absolute, no-brainers that have to be there is the program evaluation project as a group project, the school improvement plan project as an individual project. If you think that that's going to create an issue in getting anything else done with that, the reflections on the opportunity gap, yeah, we can, I can back off on that one. We don't have to have that one for your credentialing. But we'll have to have some sort of a discussion about that one, because the looking at issues related to diversity and issues related to inclusion and issues related to all those sorts of things is an important part of the standards. And so we can curb that. Excuse me, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, like from a standards portfolio perspective, I feel really good about that piece of things, because we did a semester-long individual research project in the spring surrounding equity.
Equity.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know. We need, have you looked at the material over there yet to see if it mirrors material that you may have had in any other course?
It looks, to me, I don't know what you guys think, but it looks really similar to our project for Dr. Leach's class.
Okay, I'm not gonna, let me think on it tonight, but my tendency is to think that maybe, okay, well, let's drop that out as a major project. Figure out how we can do a bit of a discussion about that, maybe on, discussion board or forum board or whatever. We don't necessarily have to go into detail into content. I just need to kind of feel comfortable that you have a good sense about what the notion of opportunity gaps mean, and what it means to think about how we close these achievement gaps that we're confronting in schools. Now, if we've already had the content and you've already had the course material, there's no sense, beating a dead horse there. And I'm okay with that. But the first two, yeah, they have to be there. The project evaluation project, school improvement plan project, they both have to be there. All right. Let me think of it overnight, because I need to. All right. No, it's none of your issue. Yeah, it is too. In the spring, the school administration program decided they wanted to redo two courses. And actually part of it was back into last fall. The work and the discussion began on it. And there were two courses that they wanted to redo. One was the 5070 course and one was the 5080 course. Now, there were syllabi built and incorporated into the program to rewrite those two courses, but it took out, in one example, it took out a significant amount of material and added a significant amount of leadership focused material. It took out a lot of technical stuff, but more leadership focused stuff in it. And when the program got ready to get the two courses approved this fall, they have been stalled within the department because the program did not get permission from the department to make those changes. And so I think there are multiple syllabi out there with different levels of stuff in them. And, you know, we've complained, and I think that's going to get fixed quickly. Because it is confusing. It's confusing if you have to try to teach it when you have taught a different course for the same number for, you know, ever. And suddenly you have to make big changes in it. So we've had some issues with the course. I've had some issues with this course and another course simply because it's not what the course needs to be. But the things that are required for portfolio, we have no leeway on, and so we have to do those. But if you have already had course material that dealt with the diversity and the opportunity gaps, then I don't see any reason we need to build a project around that. I think it's useful to go back and rehash some of that material, though, because I don't think you can ever really cover that enough. But we don't necessarily have to build a project around it, I don't think. Because if you already had that in the course and had to do projects around that, I suspect that your project for this class would be something that looks a whole lot like the project you did for the other class. Just conjecture, just, you know, thinking about it. And so there's no sense, you know, writing the same thing twice or using the same original material twice since you own the material. If you plagiarize yourself, it's not plagiarism, by the way. And so, yeah, okay. I'm going to make an executive decision. The reflections on opportunity gap, that is not going to be a required project. We will put something in its place that has to do with a forum or, you know, maybe an interactive discussion or something like that. Or, you know, I may get, I don't know.
I'm sure there's plenty of like articles and things. If we did like a breakout group and then we can summarize I think that's
Yeah. I mean, the material you've got up there is, I think, is decent material, those articles, and then we can kind of, you know, work with those as a discussion in class, as in groups or whatever, just random groups. That way we don't have to worry about putting groups together for that either. We just do a random sort of thing. Okay, I can live with that. I'm good. I hope you are. Pretty sure in the chaos and all that's going on, turmoil around the world, we're not going to get, I'm not going to get fired for, well, you know, I'm 70 some years old. I mean, it takes 3 years to fire me. So what, you know?
We got your back. Don't worry about
Don't worry about it. You know,
Yeah.
I got myself covered.
it.
When I was 13 years old, my mother said, if you get yourself into things, you got to get yourself out. So, of course, I was the fifth of 5 living on a hard scrabble farm out in the woods. So I guess all my other siblings had already broken plenty of ground for me by the time I got there. Okay, yeah. I will make the changes on the webpage tonight. I've been having some problem getting YouTube to process, so it may be tomorrow morning before anything goes up, but I'll make those changes. Okay. All right.
Thank you for that too. Thank you.
Well, you know, as I said, I had not looked at that completely from those perspectives, and it's always good to know what you've had as a prerequisite, what's happened beforehand, and so that's useful, and that's not something I was provided, but you know, it's probably my fault too. I didn't ask, so.
Well,
It helps a lot. Thank you. Oh,
Yeah.
Sorry, Alexa.
Go ahead. Thank you so much. I think my understanding from Dr. Mudawa is that the order of our courses changes. Like each cohort doesn't have the exact same order of courses. So I think it's also possible, like you probably.
Other people may not have. So yeah,
Mhm.
that's why I think we need to talk about it, but I just don't think we need to build necessarily a big assignment around it. Okay. So we will spend the time talking about it, but we won't build the big assignment around it. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, and I think I'm just gonna roll on through here. I think we can be finished in another 20, 25 minutes or so, maybe half hour. So if you're good, if you need to take a break, get up, take a break, come back. Uh, or don't come back, whatever it is you choose to do. I'm not trying to tell you how to live your life, but let's kind of roll along here and see a little bit more about uh, sort of the legal environment of this stuff. And you've probably covered this. You probably had school law. You probably, though I don't know that they spent a lot of time talking about the school improvement process or school standards or things like that. They seem to be a bit more enamored about the cases having to do with equity and things like that, and censorship and all that. But let me go over here and pull down real quickly the handout that, well, hold on a second. Somewhere in shuffling all this stuff around, I've kind of lost track of something here. There we go. Okay, here we go. Now, tell me if you have seen this or been exposed to this a lot. This is the state code in North Carolina 115C. And it is part of the code that deals with school improvement, development of school improvement plans. So and since it's a more recent part of the code, it supersedes previous elements of the code that sort of drove how we did school improvement. And it's pretty exhaustive. It goes through all the pieces. It defines a school improvement plan. It goes into who's involved, which representatives have to be in there, what the school improvement team has to be composed of, who needs to be in there, kind of the way in which decisions are made. The fact that school improvement always has to be dealt with in open meetings, just like other school board functions or school functions, with the exception of decisions that involve personnel or decisions that involve proprietary information or decisions about health and safety of individual students or groups of students. Yeah. Otherwise, it's got to be an open meeting, and it can't be an open meeting that's at a difficult time for parents to meet or parents to come to the meeting. It has to be within the frame of when a reasonable working person might be able to make it. So you can't do it at 8:30 or right after school. You got to do it after 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock or whatever.
I was going to make a comment about that because ours are scheduled. Well, currently, while remote learning, they're scheduled at 2 p.m. But previously, they were still after school. But I mean, they are open, so a parent could attend. But we designate at least one parent as a team member to follow with that part.
Yeah, well, it's on the edge. It's a gray area because what they were encouraging schools to do was to have sort of representative groups of parents instead of have the one token parent that you put on the team, and to have meetings in such a time frame that all the other parents could attend if they wanted to. Now that also includes virtual, and so if you got guys meeting at 2 o'clock in the afternoon for this meeting, and you have people that are working from home and still on the clock at 2 o'clock working from home, essentially you precluded them from attending the meeting. Now, people are on swing shifts. Yeah, you can make all kinds of cases there. But I suspect that if you had an audit come in, they wouldn't gig you over that, but they would certainly encourage you to change those meeting schedules to accommodate parents in different timeframes. So lots of places will alternate those meetings. They'll do one at a certain time during the week at a certain time of the day, and they'll do one another day of the week in an evening or something like that. Now, it creates a problem in terms of getting teachers and school staff, to kind of come back and things like that. But it is the intent of the law. The intent of the law is that it would be a viable meeting for anyone to attend, since it's an open meeting. But far be it for me to have, to question a school's read there. And I'm sure they've talked to their lawyer, and most lawyers are about as good as Barney Fife as being school lawyers, but that's another sort of take on that. These are all public records. Everything that you do that's not personnel or identifiable student related or dealing with psychological issues or content are part of public record, and they have to be, and anybody can get a look at that. Anything dealing with school safety is exempt to a certain degree, but you have to look at that very closely. That's in a different section of the law, and you have to look at that very closely to make sure that even school safety stuff is exempt to the level that you're trying to exempt it. There has to be a school improvement plan. There's all kinds of standards for that. I thought the interesting piece to the law was the strategies for improving school performance. The first strategy was to include a plan for the use of staff development funds that may be made available to the school by the school board, by the local board of education to implement school improvement plans. Immediately in the next session, that was repealed by a law that basically said you didn't have to fund staff development out of those funds. Still has to be, staff development is still required to be a part of the school improvement plan, but it is not funded by outside funds. Everything else is kind of what you're used to, school safety, discipline. You can use state funds to help implement, but it has to be in accordance with the law. You need to identify instructional practices that are designed to improve academic performance. And those need to be identified school-wide, basically. They can be different. They can differ by grade. They can differ by subject. They can differ in different ways, but they need to be consistent across the school. And one thing that I didn't mention back up here in the planning process is that you always want to have teachers and school staff involved in making these, building this school improvement plan, and as members of the school improvement team.
So that means that the principal's not supposed to just make the goals for the school improvement plan every year?
If you read the law, I think that's what
Okay.
it is, yeah. But,
Okay, that's what I want to make sure. Okay, thank you.
I mean, this is the law. But we have people that kind of play fast and loose with that. Yeah, they do. It's more efficient to do it that way, and that's the way we used to do it all the time when schools were great. So let's keep doing it that way. Some notes about staffing, but it really doesn't staff it enough, and that. That you should have really, you really need somebody to run the school improvement team that does not have another purpose. And it doesn't have to be a continuing requirement or a continuing responsibility, but it can't be 50% of somebody's load or another 3 lines in the some assistant principal's job description. Should be ideally someone to run that process, and not necessarily an administrator. Doesn't require an administrative credentials to do that. There needs to be a school vote on the plan. You know, all personnel in the school, including staff, should vote on it. It's a secret ballot, secret vote. So, you know, once you get the plan out there, people get a look at it. By secret vote, secret ballot, they vote whether they like it or not. Now, the consideration of school safety components may be exempt from that because it will need to match other legal requirements. Maybe you got other legal requirements that you have to match. You know, for example, right now you have a limited number of folks that can be in a space. And that's really a state guideline and I guess a county or city guideline. But if the school improvement plan did not have that in there as a safety measure, then it has to be consistent with the authority is superseded by the locality and the state. The plan has to be adopted by the local board. They cannot pick it. They cannot item veto it. They either have to accept the plan or not accept the plan. And if they don't accept the plan, they have to give the reasons why they don't accept the plan. And then it goes back to the school and school divisions to go back through the process again and see what changes they're willing to come up with. And goes back through the cycle and you know, the sort of the public hearing notion almost. And then you have the local board either adopts or doesn't adopt. So they can't exercise their personal desires or you know, individual biases they have on parts of the plan. They have to accept it or not accept it. Now, all school improvement plans are for a period of 2 years, which essentially means that they have to be reviewed no more than 2 years at a time. So you can't let one run for 5 years and go back and then tinker with it. You have to look at it 2 years out. Now, it doesn't mean you have to change it. Doesn't mean you have to revise it. It just means that the whole process, you got to go through the whole process again 2 years out, and you can adopt the same plan, or you found out what works, what doesn't work. You may make revisions in it, but all the other guidelines hold. Boards still have to approve it in total or not at all. And you still have to have public input, and you still have to have a vote in the school, and you know, all those things are still there. But it should be looked at every 2 years. That's what the code requires. If it overlaps other plans, if there are other plans that you had in place, discipline plans or you know, instructional assessment plans or whatever, and this school improvement plan overlaps those previous plans, no matter the authority of the previous plan, whatever it overlaps, you can basically pull out and put to the side. The school improvement plan supersedes any other plans in place if there's a direct overlap. And that's not likely, but it does happen sometimes. And basically, then there's the compliance standard that puts some liability on professional personnel. Because anybody that's involved in the school, or actually even a taxpayer that has concerns about compliance with the school improvement code, can raise a concern, and the superintendent, quote unquote, shall make a good faith effort to investigate the concern. And he has to provide the superintendent he or she has to provide a written response to the concern. So it's not necessarily a civil liability, but there is a liability that could be detrimental to someone's career or could be used in some other proceeding looking at a person's fitness to keep performing their duties. And so it's just as important how you respond to concerns as it is that there might be a concern. And that can come from anywhere. Now, that's all it's in the code. And there's a copy of the code linked to your on As You Learn. And so you should be aware of the code pieces, particularly in terms of the structure of school improvement teams and what goes into school improvement plans and the timelines, the 2-year timeline, and who has to look at it, and public input, you know, all those things that we tend to want to short circuit and find a way around. Those are the actual requirements in the code. And so you have to be a little bit concerned about that. Yeah. Let me go over to one more thing, and then I think we will probably be done. Okay. If you go back and look at what am I looking at here? There's way too much in this web page. It really was poorly put together. Okay, well, I'm drawing a blank here at the minute. Hold on just a second. I'll find this. I know what I'm looking for. It's over in the student learning objective piece. Let me go back up here. It requires, if you look at 3.1 and 3.2 of the student learning objectives, it requires that students, you, will be able to identify relevant components of the regs regarding school improvement planning with citations to specific statutes, and that students will identify areas in need of improvement or in complete compliance with the statutes of the school improvement process on the book. So, you know, your preparation and your licensure also requires that you are aware of what those standards are, what the code looks like, and the basic elements of the code. And I always tell people that when you're dealing with stuff like code, like state codes or federal codes, understanding them is sometimes like reading hieroglyphics. And so rather than to try to remember chapter and verse of codes, what I always required and what I also always suggested is that you have that little binder right there on the top of your desk that has the relevant codes in it. And so you have something like the school improvement code right there. And the codes surrounding student learning objectives right there. And there's codes surrounding other accreditation stuff right there. So that, you know, if you ever have a question, God forbid, about, you know, what's legit and what's not legit, you have the code right there to take a look at it. And the language in the code. All right, I always hate that session. It's like when I do a research class, I always hate the session that's talking about the laws and the regs around human subject research and use of dangerous material research and things like that, because sometimes it turns on the tense of a tense of a verb or something. And so, the shall or should or can, or, you know, all those things may be big deals in terms of the intent of the code. And so it's always good to know those, or at least have them available so that you can take a look if you need. But that's basically the code around it. And you know, it's the one you have to pay attention to. There are other codes that could apply to it. There are codes about you know, related in some ways about FERPA and things like that that kind of limit the type of information you can collect and the type of data you can collect. But the primary code for school improvement is that section 115. And that's one you kind of need to know. So I have to ask, have you seen that before? Any place? Have you had school law yet? Yes, of course you have. You haven't yet? Oh, that's a fun course.
The last course we take.
On the way out the door, and you can really go, this is our last course. Yeah. Okay. But it is, you know, it's stuff that I always tell people, you know, it's not going to make your career or break your career, not knowing all the codes and all the standards, but it sure can make it a whole lot harder if you get crossways of them. And, you know, there's always somebody out there looking to bust your chops these days. And, you know, if you're in a school, you're always going to be, and it's a very chaotic time right now, you're always going to be blamed for things by parents and by other individuals. And so, yeah, you just need to make sure you got your backside covered. And if nothing else, if it requires changing the time of a meeting or whatever, that's great. You know, simple enough fix. And you'll never get raked over the coals for, you know, being slightly off and being able to fix it pretty simply. But you can't know that if you don't know the codes. So, yeah, keep a copy handy. They'll help you. Okay. Other thoughts, other questions, other ideas. Next week, go vote. And then perform whatever ritual you do on election night.
And bring other people to vote with you.
And bring everybody you can scoop up, you know? Particularly if you've got a van or, you know, big whatever, just grab them, take everybody. If we ever got even 70% of the population, the eligible voters to vote, this country would be massively different. But the closest we've ever got to that, I think we got to 60% or 61% in 2008. And never been close to that before and not close to that after. So hopefully we can, you know, actually get people to vote and build a country that we want to build a school system we want to build, one that's not done on the cheap all the time. So I'm not being political. I'm being totally objective here. I'll go vote. I don't care what you believe in. Just go vote, so that we do get you know, a democratic process. All right, folks, I will formalize what we talked about in terms of the assignment on the webpage either later this evening or tomorrow morning. And then we'll kind of go from there and follow through with the directions we have coming. And you're coming up close on the first big group, the group assignment. So if you need you know, time to work with that, you know, yeah, I'll be, some of you have submitted stuff a little bit along, but I'm kind of just hanging until it all comes in, and then I'll go through all 4 of them. 5, is there 5 groups, 4 groups? I can't remember. Let's see, 7. Okay, anyhow, we'll go through and look at those in their entirety, and then give you a chance to think about a rewrite if you need a rewrite. But my intent is that they all should be complete, in good shape, and perfect. And if we have to do a rewrite to do that, we'll do a rewrite. This is not, you know, those one shot and you either get it right or wrong. The world's not made up of right or wrong. It's made up of under the circumstances. And so you have to operate that way. Okay, folks, I got nothing else. If you don't have another question or another thought, I'll turn off the recorder and